This is going to be a little awkward, you guys. They got me doing some stuff this morning until we can get a new chair.
All right, you're all set to go.
Okay, good morning. This meeting will now come to order. My name is Joseph Dakers. I'm the town assessor, and I would like to welcome you to the June 9th, 2022 meeting of the West Hartford Board of Assessors. This meeting is being conducted in a virtual format in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act as amended by Public Act number 22-3, which authorizes municipalities to conduct public meetings virtually. Members of the public can view the meeting live on West Hartford Community Television at www.whct.org and www.youtube.com/WHCTV5. The meeting is also being recorded for an on-demand viewing and will be available on the town's website for at least 45 days. First, I would like to ask all participants to mute your device when you are not speaking. If you wish to be recognized, please raise your hand. I will call on you in the order I see hands raised. If you are participating by audio only, or I do not call on you and the debate is ending, then please unmute your phone and let me know so that I can recognize you. Second, all speakers must make a good faith effort to state the person's name and title at the outset of each occasion that such person participates in the meeting. Third, all votes must be taken by roll call unless the vote is unanimous. Fourth, if any participant has a problem with connectivity, please let me know and I will recess the meeting while the problem is resolved. Cannot be resolved quickly, I will ask you to call into the meeting using a phone and participate via audio only. The first order of business is the selection of the Board of Assessors Chair. I will facilitate the election of the position of chairperson. Once you have a chairperson elected, I will turn it over to the chairperson to preside over the remainder of the meeting. I will now outline the duties of the chair. It is the duty of the chairperson to call the meeting to order, preside over the meeting and announce the order of business, to state and to vote all questions that come before the board, work with town staff to gather such information as the board may require in order to carry out its duties and responsibilities. Nominations for the position of chairperson will be taken from the floor. Any member may nominate himself or herself for the role or any other regular member. After the nominating process is finished, members must vote on the proposed candidates. Nominations are now in order for the position of chairperson of West Hartford Board of Assessors. But before we do that, I would like to have a roll call. James Healy, Attorney Healy notified us early that he would not be present at this morning's meeting. I think he has a trial engagement. Lance Houston. I can't hear you, Lance. You're muted, Lance. I can't hear you.
Is it here?
Okay, got you. Philip Orzek.
Present.
Roberta Roanow.
Here, I'm here.
Okay. Nominations are now in order for the position of chairperson of the West Hartford Board of Assessors. So we essentially have three members here. And It's not a challenging position. It's just one of responsibility to guide and direct these meetings. All three of the members here are new members, but duly positioned to serve on this board for the town of West Hartford. So are there any nominations from the floor for this position? Anyone interested in serving as the chair of the Board of Assessors for the town of West Hartford?
I'll volunteer myself.
All right. So Lance Houston is nominated. Are there any further nominations? Well, it appears that there are no further nominations. So with that, the nominations are closed. Would you like to make any comments, Lance? If not, that's okay.
Not this time.
I will now call on each board member and ask for a yay or nay vote for the position of chairperson. Lance Thorne Houston. I'm looking for an audible from Philip and Roberta.
Yay.
Yay.
Lance Thorne Houston is the newly elected chairperson for the West Hartford Board of Assessors. Congratulations. I now turn the meeting over to our newly elected chairperson. Through you, Mr. Chair, might I recommend that your next order of business be to amend the agenda for today's meeting to include the approval of the minutes from the April 14th, 2022 meeting, and absent any objection from the board, that a subsequent motion be made to approve the minutes. I believe I sent you all a copy of the minutes, if not previously this morning.
Have it.
Yes.
Just a sidebar, Lance, I will make sure that you get all of the other appropriate guidelines for the chair person position that you do not have at this point.
Thank you so much.
Would you submit a motion to amend the agenda, Lance, to include the minutes?
I will.
From the
Yes.
Okay.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now, having had the minutes before you, is there a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Yes.
Philip?
Motion to.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so the minutes have been approved. I pointed out it'll be a little bit awkward this morning because of this transition that we're going through. But I assure you, we'll smooth this out during our next following meetings. Mr. Chair, we have, I'd like to move the agenda around a little bit. We have some representatives with us today from the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents. We also have, I believe, one of their legal representatives. And this is a professional trade. Well, and they may clarify this for me. At one time, they were a professional trade organization. Hold on one second. Staff is coming in now, so it can get a little noisy. So we have some representatives from CAPS to kind of address some questions that were raised at our last meeting in April. And in terms of what do they actually do, from the material that I have read, they are a professional organization. They've gone through some transitions over the years. At one time, they were purely a trade organization, and they've changed their name several times. I think they have had their certification back to, I think, 1904, as I recall from their documents. And they are applying for an exemption on the real estate at 26 Caya Avenue. They also have business personal property, furniture, fixtures, equipment, and machinery that they're seeking the exemption on. Years ago, they rented property space from us at the Smith School. And at that time, I think it was back in 1991, they were given an exemption on their personal property. They did not own any real estate at the time. And interestingly, over the years, I think the last declaration or application that we received from them was in 2001, prior to this application. So I guess I would like to have the representatives from CAPS kind of give us a summary and overview of what they do. I understand that you are is a membership organization for public school superintendents offering professional development, education, and social events. That you were formerly a trade association with a 501c3 C6, and now you are a 501c3. And perhaps you can kind of address why you made that transition from a C6 to a C3 when you give us your background. And I think that's enough of the general information.
Good morning, everyone. This is Melissa Mack. I'm an attorney with Shipman and Goodwin. I'll give a brief introduction and then I'll hand it over to Fran Rabinowitz to kind of talk about some of the activities of the organization. Thank you for your time this morning. We are talking about the 501c3 organization that has always been designated as a 501c3. They had an affiliated organization, which was the 501c6 organization under the current name of Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents, Inc. This is, I think, where some of the confusion lies. Those two organizations were formed separately many years ago. My understanding was that there may have been a consideration that the C6 would be doing lobbying activities on behalf of the school superintendents. You can see from the past several 990s that there has not been lobbying activities conducted by either organization, the C6 or the C3. So a few years ago, the leadership decided to avoid some of the administrative burdens of two organizations when really both of them were furthering the charitable and educational activities, the mission of the combined organizations. They decided to merge. And so that's where you see the C3 organization being the surviving organization. We circulated yesterday the updated tax exempt determination letter from the IRS that confirms they are a 501c3 organization. However, they're continuing on with the name that had been associated with the C6 organization, which is Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents. You would see on the 990s of the C6 organization that they did spend a bit of money each year hiring a lobbyist who was charged with keeping the organization apprised of legislative developments at the Connecticut legislature that would impact public schools so that they could use their educational resources to make sure that timely information and guidance was sent out to the public school systems. And so That's kind of an overview of the organizational structure. This would be considered a new application, initial application by the C3 because they had never owned the real property at Caya Avenue. And so now I would turn it over to Fran Rabinowitz, who is the executive director, to talk about their educational activities. And then we're welcome to answer any questions from any of the panel. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for hearing our situation today. So I became executive director almost 5 years ago, and I spend most or all of my time in working with superintendents in various ways just to improve education throughout the state. We worked very hard on a comprehensive plan for educational improvement, which I bring around the state to boards of education and to the legislature, to the governor's office, and to the State Department of Ed. I also support superintendents in individual issues that they may have in their school district or issues with boards of education. I provide a great deal of professional development for superintendents in terms of leadership or whatever happens to be the issue of the day. You know, we right now are very centered, as you understand, on school security. We have, when I heard social events, I smiled. We do have social events, but they always follow a professional development that we do in order to have networking for superintendents. I do not lobby. I do have a lobbyist. You know, it's a very small portion of our budget, but he just keeps us apprised of you know, any bills that are raised that might be concerning to me or concerning to the organization and to superintendents. And I have appeared certainly at public hearings to speak on the bill that has been raised, but I have not raised any of our own bills. That's not our business. And, you know, we're really into ensuring the quality education in the state of Connecticut. I am very proud of the fact that all but 2 districts throughout the state, so we have 167 districts that belong to our organization, and we are dependent on district dues to do the work that we do. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. By the way, I'm a former superintendent in Hamden and in Bridgeport. I don't know if that matters.
I have a question.
Sure.
So, well, 2. How many people are employed at that location, and how much of your work is for improving the superintendents at the location, or do you go out to other locations for that work?
I go out to a lot of other locations, and a lot of the work is done remotely now, just as we're doing it right now. It's myself who's the executive director. I'm full-time. I have another person who's in charge of professional development. She's 4 days a week. I have another superintendent, retired superintendent, 1 day a week who works with coaching new superintendents. I have a 2 day a week person who does our website and all of our virtual presentations. And I have Catherine, who's with me today, who is in charge of our budget, and she works 2 days a week.
So you're the only full-time person and the rest are part-time. There's
Yes.
about 5 people.
Right, that's correct.
And outside of COVID, you would all be at that location?
That's right. That's right. But we're relooking at what we do right now, and we are certainly at the location every day someone is at the location, but we are also doing more things remotely, as I'm sure everyone is.
Right, and you're not renting out any of the space for anything else?
No. But we have a lovely conference room that you're welcome to use at any time. It's really nice, and it has great technology for remote and in person.
Through you, Mr. Chair, with the education component, is there a requirement for the superintendents to have continuing education certifications? And if so, is that something that is filtered through the CAPS organization?
Yeah, well, no, we do not have responsibility for the continuing education. Well, let me just say this, legally, or according to state regs, superintendents become certified through a college program, a graduate program. It used to be that there were CEUs every year, continuing education units. Those are no longer in place. But, you know, the idea is that we all need to be learning more and increasing our knowledge of education, because it certainly is changing.
So I just want to be clear through you, Mr. Chair, just one more question. So the association is a membership organization for public school superintendents,
That is correct.
offering professional development, education, and as you pointed out, social events that take place maybe after some training.
Yes, that's correct.
Now the CAPS Educational Foundation, Inc. was merged into the new CAPS. Is that right?
So this is where it gets a little tricky. The C6 Trade Association had the name Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents. It was merged with and into the 501c3 organization that had the name Foundation. The foundation was the surviving entity, C3, which changed its name to assume the name Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents. So only the name remains of the trade association, and the C3 has been in business for decades and is continuing on advancing the educational mission of the organization.
One question. So that is to say that there are no lobbying activities taking place today. Is that correct?
I defer to Fran, but my understanding is correct. Fran?
That's correct. I mean, you know, I want to be 100% transparent, Mr. Chairperson. We do have a lobbyist, but he is not, that lobbyist is only there to inform us of any activities related to education. I do not do my own lobbying for the organization.
I just have one follow-up, Mr. Chair. So with the synthesizing of the organizations, the former trade association and now the professional development organization, if you will, what are you doing different? Is there something that you used to do that you're not doing no more, or you're just doing them all under one umbrella now?
You know what? That's a great question, and the answer is we're doing it under one umbrella. I do not remember a time, and I've got a lot of time under my belt. as a superintendent, et cetera, I do not remember a time when it was a lobbying organization, but I understand it was at some point in time, but it hasn't been for many years. And so I never understood, and that's why I pushed for this, because I never understood the difference between the foundation and CAPS. It was very confusing, and I had to have a board meeting for the foundation, and it just didn't make sense to me. So I don't know how that came to be. I think it may have come to be because they wanted to apply for grants, but frankly, it's what we are. We are a nonprofit 501c3. We're not a trade organization.
Do you, Mr. Chair, does the board have any further inquiries for the CAP staff and their council?
Joe, this is Philip. I'll just ask Caps. You list a lot of furniture, fixtures, and equipment on some of your disclosures. What's like the nature of that equipment? How do you use that?
Mostly desks, conference table, and computers. We do all our work obviously online. We have a printer, and we have a large screen in the conference room.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just want one more piece of clarification. And do you influence legislation pertaining to education in the state of Connecticut through your lobbyists or through any of those associated activities?
I don't know that I influence it. I hope I do. If in fact, the chair of the education committee, Bobby Sanchez or Doug will call me once in a while and ask about a certain movement that they're hoping to take, and they'll ask my opinion. Yes, I do, I hope, influence it in that way. For example, when the African American Latino curriculum was going to be mandated, I asked them to wait a year and treat it as an elective, not a mandated elective, but an elective for a year so that we could get people trained, we could get a curriculum in place. And that is what happened. Do I know that I was the one that influenced that? No, but we did have a discussion.
This is Melissa Mack from Shipman and Goodwin. Just as a point of clarification, 501c3 organizations are allowed to be able to do a insignificant, insubstantial amount of lobbying in furtherance of their purpose. When you have a 501c3 organization, many times the advocacy work could be educational. Lobbying from a federal standpoint is very, very specific. It's when you are contacting a legislator or a executive member of the executive branch about a specific piece of legislation that's either proposed or in effect, and you are taking a position on it. So it's very, very specific what comprises lobbying activity from a federal perspective. Merely giving information that would be helpful to the industry or as Fran was mentioning, would be good for implementation of something would not be considered lobbying from a federal perspective.
So is the source, the primary source of your income, membership dues?
Yes.
I did see your 990, so I'm just, but that's the lion's share of your revenue.
Absolutely.
And of course, you get grants and things of that nature, charitable donations.
Yeah, there's not as many grants available these days, but we try very hard.
Okay.
And as a point of clarification, the membership dues would be paid by the boards of ed, by the towns or by the superintendents personally. in most.
No,
cases.
by the boards of ed, by the school districts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Um, at this point, I think this is Philip. I'd propose a motion to approve the application.
A point of order, Mr. Chair. Are there any more questions for the guests at this meeting? If not, we can release them.
Not at this time.
I apologize for the what may appear to be unfluid activity here. We are in transition, and I'm wearing several hats here this morning to try to keep the ship afloat. I thank you all very much for your attendance, and the information that you have provided will be invaluable for the board to arrive at a decision on your application. Thank you so very much, and have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Right.
So I'm trying to recall, because I believe at our last meeting it was an issue ultimately with this, and I review the minutes.
Well, I know one of the things, and of course, they're not here anymore, so I can't tap them, but some of the stuff was just kind of throwing stuff up, I think. Shelley Roseanne had a couple of questions, and she had one question: what actually do they do? That's a question that I have wrote down. And one of the questions that she raised, I kind of tried to flush out. She wanted to know whether or not the education component was mandatory, which is what led me to the continuing ed piece. And the last question she asked that I didn't think was germane here was whether or not the coursework was paid for by the employee or the individual. And to some extent, as their legal representative pointed out, apparently these membership dues are paid by the local board of eds around the state. So I would gather that the employer, being the board of ed, if there were any educational requirements, that they in all likelihood will also pay for those, as they do here for us. We have to get so many CE credits every 5 years. It's a professional organization, and the town supports that by paying for these classes to maintain certifications.
Understand. Thank you.
Those were the only notes that I had. I had a number of other notes, but they were for some other matters that were before us. Those were the only notes that I had on here. Did you get a copy of the minutes?
I did.
Okay. So I think at this point, if there's no more discussion, this ratchets back to Philip's motion.
You calling for a vote?
Yes, Philip had a motion on the table. I don't know if he can hear me. Can you hear me, Philip?
You just got quiet on me.
Okay.
But yes, move to approve their motion. I find that they're organized exclusively for an educational purpose.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Our next agenda item, Mr. Chair, if you will, would be the Hebrew Home and Hospital Incorporated. This is an application. As you may recall, they're seeking an exemption on their business personal property. We have been going back and forth with this organization since February of this year. There are about 5 or 6 entities that they have, and this is the last one that we have to address. There were some questions raised about, and certainly I raised the question that we did not have a signed document in terms of their certificate of incorporation. And as of yesterday morning, I had not received anything back from them. So as a courtesy, I reached out to them and spoke with the departing CFO. They have a new one now. And at 11:34 a.m., based upon their documents, it looks like they amended and restated their certificate of incorporation, primarily focusing on the purpose of the organization to provide a behavioral health hospital for mentally ill and outpatient clinics. Previously, you may recall, there were items in there as, such as a nursing home as a part of their purposes, a rehab health facility, and a chronic disease hospital. In their amended restated document, all those have been removed. A question that a former board member raised was the space they occupy. They signed their lease at 100 Abrahms Boulevard in December of 2020. Out of the building, which has 155,676 square feet of rentable space, Hebrew Home and Hospital rents 31,820 square feet, or about 20% of the building. And then they have an agreement that the landlord occupies the top 3 floors of the building, the basement, the kitchen, the synagogue, main lobby, entranceway, corridors leading to elevators, therapy space, and space relating to subacute beds on first floor, known as unit number 1. I will add that by agreement, the tenant has the ability to use some of those spaces with a formal announcement to the landlord so that they can schedule the use of those spaces. That was one question raised by Shelley. In speaking with our corporation counsel on several occasions, one of the things that came out of that is the Connecticut Statute 33-1140, which essentially allows them to amend and restate their certificate of incorporation. And there was no signature provision indicated in that statute. So that gives us a little bit of closure on that. Appears they originally filed their certificate in the early 1900s. I think it was 1904. I apologize for the background noise. I got staff here this morning and I apologize. Everybody's here now and it gets a little loud. So that is the extent of the information that I have. I think the principal thing that was raised was that we did not have a signature the last time around. And there was some concerns that whether or not there was a provision that required a signature. And again, according to the Corporation Council and the citation I gave you of the statute, there was no signature requirement indicated. In their amendments, when they vote on these things, there are references in the amended document that is voted on by the Board of Directors. That's all I have on that. That's the extent of my knowledge about this particular organization.
I have a brief question. So we're saying that there's no signature provision required under the law. I mean, so essentially my question then becomes, is submitting the document without a signature, is that an effective legal document without the signature?
That's a good point, and I can only ratchet back to their original filing was sometime in, I think it was in 1904 or the early 1900s. And I believe those documents were duly organized and signatured. And in terms of amendments and restated certificates, I don't personally know. I can only convey what my Corporation Counsel indicated, and there was no signature provision indicated in that statute.
So this is just an amended certificate of incorporation.
That is correct.
Yeah, I think it's valid. As long as the original, I mean, I know a little bit about that organization. I know they ran into a lot of financial difficulty and they had to pare down their operation significantly. And they brought in another for-profit company to run the rest of the facility. So this is what they're left with. And they, as far as what I know about them, they do have a charitable purpose. They don't require 100% payment from all patients, but they provide a need for a lot of people with memory loss and other more significant mental issues. It's mostly an older population that's using the facility. And they also, as you said, they have a new director. They've had a lot of organizational issues as far as just getting the right management in there. But they, as far as I can see, that they meet the requirements of the statute as far as what would an organization that would get tax exempt status.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I can dovetail Roberta's comments in our previous meeting, based upon some input from our Corporation Counsel, they had cited 1281 subsection 7, and of course that deals with charitable organizations, which they are. But the Corporation Counsel also suggested, and they don't have the authority to go over this board here. But I don't want to do their comment any injustice, so I just want to give it to you verbatim. And it pertains to 1281 subsection 16, which addresses hospitals, which is really what we're talking about now as being tax exempt. Forgive me, I had all that material here. Oh, here we go. All right, so I'm just gonna go straight to the meat of this 2-page document, and and they go on by saying, under the circumstances of this case, I believe you would be justified in concluding that based on its tax exempt status with the IRC, Hebrew Home and Hospital, Inc. fulfills the statutory definition of nonprofit hospital, nonprofit nursing home, or nonprofit residential care home in accordance with Connecticut General Statute 12412, subsection 5. And in accordance with Connecticut General Statute 12-88, Hebrew Home and Hospital, Inc. qualifies as a hospital in which real property is so held for hospital purposes, but I do not have sufficient information to determine whether any income is derived from Hebrew Home and Hospital, Inc., but would be assuming based upon IRC tax status that profits and income is not derived. The determination as to whether Hebrew Home and Hospital, Inc. may claim an exemption under Connecticut General Statutes 1281-16 is a factual determination for the Board of Assessors to make based upon all the facts at its disposal. But I believe you would be justified in concluding that Hebrew Home and Hospital is exempt from taxation pursuant to Connecticut General Statute 12-81-16. And I just want to qualify Court Counsel's response in that this entity, Hebrew Home and Hospital, Inc., owns no real property. The real property is owned by another entity, unrelated. They are taxable. They pay a property tax on the real property to the town of West Hartford. I think we have about an $11 million value on the property. They're only seeking an exemption for their business personal property. And they did file a declaration of personal property. And I think it was somewhere in the area of about, I don't know, I think it was somewhere near about $300,000 in personal property that they own at that address. Just bear with me a second. I just want to make sure I give you an accurate figure here. Well, I don't want to belabor this, but suffice it to say that they did submit a declaration of personal property. I did see it, and my recollection is it was about $300,000 or more in business personal property that they're seeking the exemption on. Sorry, I don't have that number in front of me. Yes, it is $276,440 in business personal property.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's all the information that I have on them.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Any others?
Do we all vote now?
Is there a
Does there
second?
need to be a second?
Oh, I'd second the motion.
Okay, with that, motion is approved.
All right. I don't know if we're going to get through this next one today, but I think we should start it. I provided you with a copy of a Supreme Court decision that was published in September of 2021. And this stems from a tax appeal against the town of Cromwell. And the plaintiff is Rainbow Housing Corporation. They happen to be a subsidiary of the Connecticut Institute for the Blind, or Oak Hill. The organization was previously exempt in Cromwell, Connecticut prior to 2017. I don't know why they changed that position, but they did. And of course, the defendant went to the Board of Assessment Appeals. The Board of Assessment Appeals denied their request. They filed a petition with the Superior Court, and ultimately it ended up in the hands of the Connecticut Supreme Court. So as a result of this, and I'm sure they have a professional organization, we have a floodgate of requests here in the town of West Hartford. You see a few of them in front of you on the agenda here. 1, 2, 3. They're actually 7 properties. Some of them are condos and some of them are freestanding homes. I think one is a multifamily home on Ardmore Road. Many of them have changed their certificate of incorporation. They've amended their purpose to point out that they provide temporary housing and to support the mentally ill or folks who have some other kind of challenging disabilities. And the Supreme Court seemed to be quite clear on that. However, there is chatter in circles from counsel on both sides that this may not be the end of this issue. They don't think it was a clear-cut win for anybody, but in the interim, these organizations are now updating their certificate of incorporation to make sure their purposes clearly point out that they are temporary housing. One of the big sticking points is that, what is temporary housing? Well, I guess, if it's an orphanage, how long are you going to be there? Until a family is found that will take you in. It could be 3 years, it could be 4 years, it could be 10 years. And of course, there were some other examples that were pointed out in there. So of interest under 1281 subsection 7, it's the subsection B within that section that speaks to this question about subsidized housing, number one. But more importantly, there's an exclusion in there to not include, they pointed out 5 types of housing. One of them was orphanages, and you have to excuse me, I don't have that in front of me. I have so many documents that I'm sure you can attest to because I sent a lot of it to you by email.
Yeah.
That, anyways, there are 5 documents. Here we go. Yeah. So they highlighted orphanages, drug or alcohol treatment or rehab facilities, housing for persons who are homeless, persons with mental health disorder, persons with intellectual or physical disabilities, or victims of domestic violence, and housing for ex-offenders or for individuals participating in a program sponsored by the State Department of Correction or Judicial Branch. And then short-term housing operated by a charitable organization where the average length of stay is less than 6 months. That is the only type of housing that actually had a timeline on the length of its stay, 6 months. All the other ones just say temporary housing. Of course, it appears the justices had a problem with that. So that's the backdrop for these applications that we have before us today. And I'd like to start off, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, with item number 4, which is the RMS Development Incorporated.
Agree.
As it stands now, RMS has an Development Incorporation has an incomplete filing with us. I reached out to them. in May, on May 5th of this year, and asked them for a copy of their certificate of incorporation. We have not received that to date. If you go online to the assessor's website under exemptions, particularly quadrennial filings, you will see instructions there that tell you all the things that you need to submit with your application. And I think, and this is just me talking, I'm just being supposition here, that, you know, a lot of folks were attempting to get their material in to meet the filing timeline. But I don't see how we can act on their application because we don't have all of the documents. They have insufficient information.
Yeah, I would agree.
And I would think they would have first that they're looking for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 properties that they have. Several of them are condos, and I think one of them is a freestanding residential structure.
Is that the only piece of their application that's not complete?
Yes, that's the only thing. We have the 501c3 certification from the Department of Treasury. We have the 990s, and they're only looking, from what I can gather from their application, an exemption on the real estate. There was no reference made to personal property, nor did we receive a declaration of personal property from them.
Okay.
Yeah, after, reviewing what they've submitted, it seems to be largely copies of some recent audits. There's some financial statements in there. And then I think the last thing in all their packets that you distributed was their bylaws, which is not their certificate of incorporation.
Well,
No.
yeah, I really don't know what they do. And it's one of the, it's ratcheting back to a previous meeting. It's one of the foundational documents that the board generally looks to try to find out who they are and what it is that they do. And without that, their application says, interestingly, and I know they're hinging on the Supreme Court decision, their application, it says, what is the purpose of this organization? And the first 2 words is temporary housing or non-institutional independent living facilities for disabled or developmentally disabled persons. So, okay, that's fine. But let's see how you formally organize. Maybe they're getting that restated and it wasn't available. I don't know. All I know is we don't have it.
Well, then I think we have to, again, formally ask for the 2 items that are missing, the certificate of incorporation and the declaration of personal property, and hopefully come up at the next meeting with, they'll have a complete package, because, a lot of organizations, when they start, their certificate of incorporation is very general and doesn't have a statement of purpose. So they may have, as you said, they may have had to amend it. So I'm suggesting that we don't have a package we can vote on.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
So through you, Mr. Chair, we are tabling this pending a follow-up from the assessor's office to the applicant for additional information.
Well, that's true, but I have one additional question. Is it the procedure of the office to request this information or simply wait for it to be submitted?
Well, quite frankly, when they submit their applications, we'll screen them initially. And we do that for these purposes so that we don't waste your time. And if we find that there is some omissions, then we follow up with a call to their office, which I did. I did it on the 5th of May after screening their documents with a number of other ones that we have here. And I found that to be not available in their package of information. So as a matter of course, yes, we do that.
So that was essentially more than 30 days ago.
I'm sorry?
That phone call and the reaching out to the organization was more than 30 days ago. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir. I might add that with one of our previous items, we had been working on that since February. And on the 11th hour yesterday, I called them and I think you can see from the copy of the amended and restated bylaws that it wasn't a clean copy. If you go through the pages, it still had the tracking items on there that they left exposed just to get it in hurriedly. I would have recommended at that point that the application be denied because we never got the sufficient information.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that we certainly table it to the next meeting, but I think just for moving forward, if these are foundational documents, then it's something that the board would need to make a decision.
So through you, Mr. Chair, is there a motion from the floor to table this item to the next meeting?
I move that we
Second.
table this to the next.
Second.
Now, in the interest of your time, it's now 10 after 9. We have, let's see, 2 more items on the agenda. Would you prefer to put them off to our next meeting? It's 10 after 9, and I know that everyone has schedules here, and I don't want to be presumptuous. These 2 other items are similar housing issues. One is the Hartford area of retired citizens, and the other one is the community for independent living. These are all group home situations.
I have time to keep going.
I have a hard stop at 10 o'clock. I have to sign off at that point, but until 10, if we want to try to get those done, I would have put, I could do that.
I can remain.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I can, if we can look at item number 5, which is the CIL Realty Incorporated. It's a group home at 4 Sherwood Road here in West Hartford. We have all of the requisite documents. We have their 990s. I think there's a financial report here, a copy of their lease. And again, they're a 501c3 through the Department of Treasury. Interestingly, on this one, they amended their certificate of incorporation. And I had the date here. But the short end of it is that their purposes is to provide supported residential services, programs, and environments for persons with physical and mental disabilities of low and moderate income as those persons are defined. So Uh, Purpose of the organization, according to their application, they're quadrennial. They acquire, develop, lease, and manage approximately 110 licensed residential facilities and supportive programs that house persons with disabilities in Connecticut. And as a part of the application that you have, there's several pages. They have places in Groton, Montville, New London, Hartford, Manchester, Waterbury, Bloomfield, Southington, Stratford, Rocky Hill, Weathersfield, and Waterbury. A lot of these were denied as late as January of 2019. But they have some that have been exempt for a number of years. And they now are looking for an exemption on 4 Sherwood Road here in West Hartford. That is all I have on the general information I have on the application. Again, this one is hinging on the Supreme Court decision.
So I read the case, and it appears as though the decision rests upon whether they receive in whole or in part government support. Is that correct?
Yes, that was the position of the defendant, but it looks like that was not a critical point for the justices. They looked to subsection B of 1281-7 to make their determination. And in their determination, it was temporary housing and the fact that they may be receiving some government subsidy, whether it be federal, state, or local, wasn't important to them. And then they went on to identify 5 entities that met that standard of temporary housing, with the exception of the 5th one that had a 6-month residency requirement on there. So the defendant was hanging their hat initially on the fact that they were receiving some federal, state, or local subsidy. That was their position. And of course, that position was shot down by the justices in consideration of all the other different things that go on. They clearly look at this with a very broad standard. And I'm just using their language from what I read. And there's some social good here that's being provided by these entities. Otherwise, it is something that I guess the state of Connecticut would have to figure out how they would handle. That's my limited take on it, Mr. Chair.
Well, yeah, there were important issues in the case. I actually read it twice. And so just to your point, with the case turned on the question of how temporary, these entities were for residential purposes. But I saw the case, but I didn't see any sort of further cases sort of that will elaborate on that one point. This case from 2019, I believe, as well.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last piece.
The case, I believe, is from 2019, I believe. I'll take a look again
Okay.
to confirm. Give me a short moment here.
It says the opinion was released in September 2021.
Okay, 21, thank you.
But I mean, to speak to those 5 types of housing that Joe mentioned, there's orphanage, drug or alcohol treatment, housing for persons that are homeless or with a mental or health disorder, intellectual or physical disability, housing for ex-offenders for Department of Corrections, And then the fifth one is that short-term 6-month one. But, you know, if the population at this facility is disabled individuals, then that would seem to fall under, you know, these categories that would enable the tax exemption.
Right.
Do we have any information on what their population is exactly?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I do not, Philip, at this time. I think some of the noise, quite honestly, and I've been around probably too long, with the proliferation of these type of group homes, was concerns raised about the possibility of ex-offenders being located in some of these places. And of course, people were concerned about their communities by having these type of places there, not knowing who was going to be housed in them. I have seen one or two here in West Hartford over the years that house people that have some kind of physical challenges and they need support. Based upon some of these applications that we're going to look at, the goal of the organization is to get them to a point where they can live independently on their own. And apparently the state is underwriting this based upon some of these financials that I'm looking at. They're actually paying for this. I think there's a collective. I ran some numbers. I don't have them in front of me. Again, I apologize. Just trying to keep all this together. But I think we're looking at over almost $1.5 million in terms of. No, it's about $1 million in terms of our total tax exposure. I'll have that number for you, more accurate number for you at the next meeting. That's not a criteria for denying it, but I just want you to be fully informed about what's involved.
I think these companies maintain pretty sizable payrolls. Do we know what kind of the largest block of their employees are? I mean, do they employ mental health professionals or real estate, you know, property managers primarily?
Most of that information may be in their 990s, Philip. Oftentimes it is. They'll show an allocation of staff and salaries. For example, I'm looking at RMS now. They have an executive director. His combined compensation is about $221,000 a year. There's a business manager whose annual salary is about $178,000 a year. And then they don't get into all of the detail of the support staff. I would have to look at their financials. I didn't delve that deeply into it, but I do have a copy of their financials. I certainly can dredge through that and have some follow-up for our next meeting.
Yeah, I think some of that information will certainly be helpful.
Okay. I'd be more than happy to flush that out for you. I suspect we'll run into a similar situation with Harc. I am familiar with Harc. Based upon my old stomping grounds, they used to have a big location in Hartford in the South End, commercial building that they had there. This organization has been around for a long time. I think once again, however, with this recent decision, they've decided to seek the exemption on the 2 locations that they have here in West Hartford. 1689 Asylum Avenue and 37-39 Ardmore. The purpose of the organization, Harc, is to ensure that people with intellectual disabilities enjoy lives of quality, inclusion, and dignity. We do this through advocacy efforts and by providing community-based services that guide the people we support along the path toward building great lives and leading lives of inclusion and meaning. Harc's services begin at birth and continue throughout the lifespan with a range of support, enrichment, employment, and residential supports, including intellectual disabilities, group homes throughout Greater Hartford. Paraphrase that a little bit. I think I can filter through. I don't want to do any of this quickly just for the sake of time. I can address those questions that was raised by Philip and flush out that as it relates to the other organizations that have a file before us and come back to you with those findings at our next meeting. Unless you have some other questions about their applications.
Are you referring to the Harc application now that you want to delay vote on that?
Well, I kind of, Roberta, I'm kind of by extension bringing Philip's questions over to Harc as well. Yes.
Okay. Because it seems like their application's fairly complete to me, but
And your application seems to be the most focused on like the charitable purpose of providing
that's what I think. It seems to-
services.
I have no aversion to that. I'm familiar with this organization and they've been around for years and what they do now is what they've been doing for years. And they deal with retired citizens in the greater Hartford area.
And I'm familiar, I'm not part of the organization, but I am very familiar with them too. So I looked at their financials, they're 990, their expenses versus income coming in. It's temporary housing to the extent that, you know, they're all temporary housing. I think it's a complete application. I'm ready to vote on it.
So is there a motion to approve?
So moved. I move to approve it.
I would second the motion.
With that, the motion is approved.
Okay, awesome. All right, so that leaves us with CIL and RMS tabled for our next meeting, pending the additional information and questions that were raised by the board.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, is there anything else?
No additional questions.
Just I will follow up with the chair to make sure the chair has all the requisite information that they need to operate in this position. And I just have a question. It's not an agenda item, but it's a question. Do any of you have an aversion to in-person meetings? Or do you prefer to continue with virtual meetings?
Through the summer, it would probably be preferable for me to be virtual, but you know, if I have to, I will come in, but I may not be in the West Hartford area for at least one of the months in the summer.
Well, that's quite all right. That's understood. And oftentimes in the warmer months, for example, even in July, sometimes it's, you know, board members take off. And of course, we put the meetings off until we have a quorum. There's still some activity to get one more member for this body. So it takes a little time for the council to identify someone for that position. So I don't have any more questions. I think one of the biggest things we did was to identify a new chairperson. And Mr. Chair, I will make sure that you have anything that you need to support you. Certainly, you may send me an email at any time, or any one of you may send me an email if you have any questions on some of the files that you get from us. And I will try to always at least get the information for you a week in advance to give you ample time to digest the stuff. Obviously, you can see from the material I gave you, the last few files, it was quite voluminous. So I apologize for giving you some of the information late. Mr. Chair, would you entertain a motion to close out the meeting?
I would. Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Okay. Aye.
Aye.
We are so adjourned.
Thank you, everyone, for your
Thank you.
patience. All right, stay safe and take care.